Well, welcome everyone. My name is Karen Alter. I'm the CEO of Shoff, and we're so excited that you all have logged in this morning for this great topic on empathy as the new employee engagement. And we are just a few housekeeping notes. We'll have you all be muted as we start out, but this is a dialogue. So when we started Shoff Chats about a year ago, it's really an online forum where we wanted to be able to have connections with our clients and colleagues and other friends in the industry. And so it's really, we want it to be more of a dialogue with you where we can exchange, ideas and conversation around these timely topics, whether it's, in leadership or communication. So we do want it to be interactive this morning, but at the start, we'll kind of mute everyone and then we'll pause and unmute, or you can put questions or thoughts in the chat as well, and we'll address those throughout the morning. But we'll also, like I said, have a recording of today's session that we can provide, and we'll have a blog, kind of a summary blog that we'll provide to you afterwards as well. So when we started talking about today's topic, empathy and employee engagement, my initial thought was Kent Kramer and Ivan Cropper of Goodwill, and just all of the impact and the great work that they are doing at Goodwill. So I'm excited to have both of them here. Welcome, Kent and Ivan. We're really excited to have you on our Shoff Chat this morning. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce them. So first, Kent Kramer. He is President and Chief Executive Officer of Goodwill of Central and Southern Indiana. Kent has been in this role since 2015, and he spent the previous 12 years leading Goodwill's retail division. He's an empathetic, mission-focused, people-first leader who states, "It's the people of Goodwill, those we serve in our communities, and those on the front lines of our work who drive the organization forward and fuel my passion for our mission." So welcome, Kent. And next, please say hello to Ivan Cropper, Vice President of Marketing and Communications for Goodwill. Ivan joined Kent and his team in December of 2019. In his role, he develops marketing, communication, and customer engagement strategies in support of Goodwill's business's mission, vision, and strategic plan. He works hand in hand with Kent to maintain the integrity of the Goodwill brand and all associate and affiliate brands, as well as communicates internally to keep Goodwill's employees engaged and working to fulfill Goodwill's mission. He brings over 25 years of experience to this role, and prior to Goodwill, he managed the IndyCar brand and implemented consumer engagement strategies that resulted in significant revenue growth. So now I'm going to turn it over to my business partner, Catherine Coble, who's going to moderate the discussion with Kent and Ivan.
Thanks, Karen. We're really excited to have you gentlemen with us today. It's a topic that's near and dear to our hearts because we believe that engagement is coupled with communications is really key to success in any organization. And so we're really excited to hear your thoughts on that. And just to get started, I'd like to help everyone really paint a picture in their minds of your organization and the role of empathy as in your leadership style. So just to kind of start, let's talk a little bit about the actual organization itself. I know that Goodwill is really multi-dimensional. You all have more than 4,000 employees. 2/3 of them have some sort of an employment barrier, and we'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like. You have 16 high schools that you all work with. You have really over 4,200 students that are looking to you for leadership, and you have 70 retail stores. That's a pretty broad audience of internal constituents, internal stakeholders. And so I'd like to hear just a little bit more. Kent, if you want to start, tell us a little bit about your leadership journey and about the organization itself, and kind of just what your experience has been as a leader.
Okay, well, thank you, Catherine, and thank you, Karen. It's great to be here with all of you, and Ivan and I love talking about empathy because we believe we are an empathetic organization, and a lot of what we do evolves around really understanding and listening to our folks, kind of knowing where they are day to day. And it's tough when you've got, Catherine, you kind of hit on it. We've got 108 sites in 39 counties in central and southern Indiana, and those over 4,000 employees are spread out amongst all those sites. So for me, coming into the organization as a VP of retail, I came in, really understanding that I've got to kind of get to know my employee base. My background was with Sam's Club and with Kmart and in multi-unit management. So my job prior to coming to Goodwill, I would visit multiple sites. At one time I had 20 Kmarts. Unfortunately, there aren't any more of those around, and in all 20 that I supervised are now gone. But with Sam's Club, you worked in the state of New Jersey and Pennsylvania and had the entire state. So was kind of used to what I learned at Walmart, management by walking around. MBWA was a concept that they're kind of known for. And it's really just going around listening to your employees, finding out where they are, gaining an understanding, and then reacting to that. And that's a culture that we have at Goodwill. And one way that I'm able to stay connected and really, close to the feelings and the thoughts and the, where the folks are at Goodwill is I get out in those sites and I visit them as often as I can and incorporate, what I learn through those visits into kind of the vision of the organization. And so that's one way that I do it. And, communication has been lifted up in our organization for the last two strategic plans is something that we've got to continue to work on. And Ivan and his team does an incredible job in a variety of platforms, whether it's videos or broadcasts to our employee base, electronic and paper newsletters, town halls. We're always trying to think of ways where we can listen and get the pulse of the employees. And then, what we've really worked on the last couple of years is how do we respond to that? And we look forward to sharing some of those ideas with you today.
Great, thank you. So obviously the last year and a half have been a little crazy for everyone. And with the pandemic, with the rise in conversations about social justice and racial tensions and just so many different things going on in our society right now, it's been tough. It's been really difficult for a lot of employees. And so there has been a lot more discussion of empathy as this new strategy for engaging employees. And I'm just curious if you can talk a little bit more specifically about that. It feels like right now, when we think about engagement, employee engagement, before the pandemic, before the current situation that we're in, we thought of engagement as something that really helped to drive productivity, that helped to drive, positive interactions with customers, that helped to drive pride for employees. And what we've heard from a lot of our clients is that people just don't have the capacity. The average employee right now just really doesn't have the capacity to think about business as usual. They're struggling with a lot of unknowns. They're working in a different way than what they were a year or so ago. And they're really just focusing they're kind of reverting in many ways back to, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Like purpose and belonging are great, but right now I just need to focus on survival almost. How has that really influenced the way that you all are thinking about your workforce and maybe how you're using an empathetic approach with employees maybe a little bit differently because of where they're at?
Yeah, well, I'll just touch on it and then toss it over to Ivan, if that's all right, because he's got a theory on Maslow that I think folks would be interested in hearing. And, as we've in the last year and a half, we have seen a shift, and a word that has, as we've worked on our, within the DEI world and putting together components of diversity, equity, and inclusion into our strategic plan, which we're working through right now, as well as an inclusion plan for an equity plan for the organization. A word that continues to keep popping up that we're really embracing is belonging. So yeah, productivity is important, and just getting the work done, but also, we believe, especially in a virtual world. So even though we've got all those employees spread out across bricks and mortar sites, we've got a lot of folks working remotely, and Ivan and his entire team are working remotely. So we've got this kind of dual world, and how do you in this new world help people really feel like they belong, and that their opinions and that their presence is valued, not just for the work, but how do you create that belongingness? And so that's something that we're really focusing on right now. But Ivan, do you mind taking the football and running with it?
No problem. Thank you, number one, for having us. We're really excited to chat with you all today. And the last 16 months, as we all know, has been challenging, but it's been multi-layered, right? Just waves upon waves, whether it's the pandemic. You touch a little bit about social and racial justice over the past year plus. And I'll touch on that and use it as a point to illustrate empathy overall. When this began, and for us, and for us, the people that we serve, both employees and folks who I consider to be customers/clients of ours, injustice has been happening for decades, right? And then you get this crescendo last year, and we knew that we, as leaders of the organization, couldn't just start to take steps to address it without actually listening to our people. So we took the time to stop and listen and set up town halls, multiple town halls, where it was a safe space going in. And Kent led from the front, meaning he pushed his leadership to say, we've got to do this. We've got to make sure that people feel like, not just feel like, but know that they can come to leadership and just unload. And those first 6 town halls that we had last year, they were difficult, really, really difficult. And not difficult because Goodwill isn't doing the right thing. It was listening to people's lives and their interactions, be it with police, be it with folks that they work with, people in our organization, and just allowing the space to be heard. But then more importantly, from a leadership perspective, saying, not only do we hear you, we feel your anguish, we feel your pain, and we commit to doing something to address it, and allowing the groups that are inside of our organization to be part of building the solutions that we would then enact. And I feel like over the last 16 months, not only it began really emotionally, and I know I'm reminded as I'm talking about it, you feel it to this moment, just how people were feeling, and more importantly, we were able to act really quickly and show them that you matter, your feelings matter to us. We want you not only to feel that sense of belonging here at Goodwill, but understand that we will address your concerns. And we immediately started making changes internally, whether it's HR practices, whether it's recognizing holidays that we had never recognized before. Juneteenth is coming up in a week, and this is the first year that we're recognizing it. And that means a lot to our workforce because, as we heard in these town halls, if some of us aren't free, none of us are free. And Juneteenth, if you understand that holiday, how could we be a society of free people when there were still enslaved people? So it's a very important day for America and for our communities. And we're recognizing that this year. And there's a lot more that goes into it, but it started understanding that we needed to listen. We needed to listen with empathy. We needed to listen with understanding and then listen with action right behind it. And that has set us on what I think is a really exciting path and one that has been embraced by our organization. And we know that it's something that, once again, coming out of the town halls, we have to be deliberate about how we move forward, not just deliberate, but we also need to be intentional. We didn't end up where we are, and this is a quote from our town hall. We didn't end up where we are today by accident. Therefore, we must be deliberate and intentional about how we move forward, seeking equity and inclusion for all people. And it starts with empathy and understanding.
That's really great insight, Ivan. And it makes me think about the fact that the world is such a different place in many respects for employers today than it was just a few years ago. And it sounds like what you're saying is there is this expectation that you're not going to just create an environment for employees that does no harm. That's kind of table stakes, but you're actually going to push beyond that to being proactive in terms of recognizing that people have lives outside of their work, recognizing that if you think about the whole person and you feed and nourish the whole person, that you're going to actually end up having the benefit of a better employee. So talk a little bit about that. I mean, it feels like that's a lot of expectation put on employers, and it gives a lot of room for employers to not do it well or to make mistakes even. So talk a little bit about that expectation.
Yeah, I'll start and then I'll toss it to Kent because I think there's an example with our Indianapolis Metropolitan High School that really amplifies what we're talking about here. But I think that at the end of the day, leading with empathy allows our workforce to be even more productive. And this past year has proven that out. As Kent said, we've got folks who, except for a shutdown, like we were a year plus ago, have been checking in for work every single day. And when you're thinking about their safety primarily and letting them know, hey, we are taking these precautions so that you are safe, even though you're checking into work, they understand that we know that they've got families that they've got to go home to and that they've got to care for. For the ones who are working remotely, one, allowing that to happen and letting folks actually see their kids and live with their kids all day long at where sometimes I know it may have been an interruption in their day, but making space for that, allowing that to happen and normalizing that to a certain extent allowed folks the release and to lower the anxiety level about getting work done. And I'd like to think that we've been as productive, if not more productive, over the past 16 months because we've been so challenged to do it. But to your comment about the holistic approach, Kent, if you want to talk about the change we went through at Indianapolis Met, which really was leading with empathy about how we cared for students and their families, and just give a couple of examples about that, Kent.
Yeah, I sure will. And I'll actually provide two examples of uh, you know, really just want to go back to the Juneteenth conversation really quick, since we're coming up on that, and the town halls that Ivan mentioned. The first few that we had were Ivan and myself, and the only other participants were our Black and Brown colleagues. And this is kind of just being transparent here as far as where we are. One of those, and Ivan, I remember this so distinctly. One of those we scheduled on June the 19th, and it was a full house, and this was one with just um, with our Black and Brown colleagues. And one of them just flat out told me, I'm off today, but this is important to me. I want to be here. And basically proceeded to say, I take every June 19th off. I have the ways that I honor and respect that day. And even though it's not a paid holiday for Goodwill, I take my own time, my own PTO time. And that just kind of hit us. And I remember Ivan and I talking about it afterwards, saying, oh my gosh, how, and something I'm very proud of. We brought that to the executive staff, and Ivan, we discussed it for maybe 5 minutes and said, next year we're making a change. So anyway, that, when we talk about response, we've been trying to do that, and we can't every time. But in that situation, we did. And we also, just as an FYI, added MLK Day as well. That was not a holiday. And we added 2 and took away 1. The Friday after Thanksgiving has always been a holiday for us, and we took that away. And people can still take it as PTO day, but that's kind of how we shifted some of our benefits. So Catherine spoke of our high schools. We operate 16 of those. 15 are adult high schools, which are Excel centers, and give an opportunity for adults that don't have their high school diploma a chance to earn one, and additional college or college dual credits and or certifications, industry recognized certifications. But our venture into education got started in 2004 with the Indianapolis Metropolitan High School. It is a traditional age 9 through 12th grade, 14 through 18-year-olds. And the school is located on our campus, right there near IUPUI, across from White River on Michigan Street. And we've operated this school, as I said, since 2004. And we really tried hard for several years to operate a traditional high school. And our thought was, provide opportunities for kids, on the near west side that may have had trouble, operating in a larger high school. So it's a smaller footprint. At one time, we had around 400 students. But we weren't successful because of a variety of reasons. And when we went for our 7-year renewal a couple of years back, we knew we had to shift our model. And the way we shifted that, we spent time listening to our students, to our staff, to graduates, to those that came and didn't have success. And we really built a school around the needs of our students. And examples would be, we operate the first high school with childcare, free childcare. What we found is, 18 to 20% of our students were either parenting or pregnant. And so many times, if that happens, a student drops out. They just find it difficult to find quality childcare or safe childcare. So we just brought it into the school. Another way that we really looked at this is what we saw is a lot of the barriers and obstacles that our students face, we didn't even know about. we would see an occasional ankle bracelet or two, or we knew that kids were coming through us through the foster system, but we didn't know a lot of the details. Examples would be, if they had, probation officer or juvenile, representative, or the main caseworker for a foster family. We didn't know those folks, so we've gotten deep in relationships, and we brought on a family empowerment coach for every student. So a traditional school might have, of our size, we made the school smaller too, right around 300 students, 2 or 3, for that size, 2 or 3 guidance counselors. We still have them, but we also have 5 empowerment coaches that they get to know not only the student, but they get to know the family. So sometimes those barriers are, mom just lost her job and they're out of, they don't have a place to live. We didn't really know that before, except on an exception basis. Now these family empowerment coaches know the families. If mom needs help finding a job, we've got those connections. If they need help finding housing, we can help connect them. So we've really made the school much smaller by adding some staff, and Goodwill invests in that. And so, from across the board, we're really trying hard to help them finish get across the finish line. And our mission or our goal at Goodwill is to help people reach their potential and become independent. And sometimes we've found out over the years, folks need help getting there. And it's really not necessarily a hand out. Like if somebody needs housing, we will work with them. It's more of a hand up and getting them connected to resources. So really pleased that, we received a 3-year kind of probationary renewal to see how the model would work. And the model has worked really well. And just this past fall or winter, we received a 7-year renewal for the school because of the results. And, old model, we had a few years where we're F or D school. And that, there's lots of metrics that go into deciding that. But we propelled to a B school now, and really excited. And we've got students graduating that are moving on to college and or career. If they move on to career, they're moving on with certifications and credentials that will get them into a job that can provide family sustaining wages. So all that through listening, through multiple stakeholders to build the right school for the students that we were attracting.
That's a great example, Kent, of, as you were saying, just being much more intentional and listening, and sometimes improving productivity, whether that's with employees or in this case for students, really comes down to removing barriers, not necessarily pushing for, more of something. So I think that's a really important lesson that we can all take away, is when you think about that whole person and the things that they might be facing in other parts of their life, those are things that are directly impacting their performance in your environment. And sometimes just removing those barriers really is the key to helping them be more productive, and not just productive from a volume perspective, but even just from a quality perspective and from an enjoyment perspective. I think that's a really critical lesson. I'd like to encourage anyone who has questions or other thoughts. We certainly want to share other observations. So I'm curious if anyone in the audience has had some experience with really empathy as a strategy for your leadership. And if you have any either examples or just observations about things that have worked or things maybe that haven't worked, how that strategy maybe has come together in an organic way. And while people are thinking about that, if you have a thought on that, if you want to drop something in the chat, and I'm happy to call on you to talk through that, rather than putting everything into the chat, just give me some sort of a heads up and I'll call on you. I am curious though, maybe Kent, you can address this, or Ivan, if you have some thoughts on, empathy is as a strategy and as a leadership style is certainly something that I think we can all expect from high level leaders, the CEO and people on the executive team. But how does that translate down to really that frontline supervisor? I'm really curious how you all have infused, if you've even been successful in infusing the idea of empathy as a core characteristic of a frontline supervisor. Is that something you can teach people?
I do think, and I'll get started, Ivan, and you can tag in. I do think, Catherine, it is something that is teachable if you've got good leaders and good teachers that can do that. I would say that it's a trait that we hire for, and my predecessor, who was in my chair for 41 years, always told me, I've always found success when as I'm hiring, I look for people that, they're good business minded people. They have an understanding of their craft. And in our world, we have manufacturing or education or retail or delivering mission. So, hiring people with that type of experience is key, but also that person has to have, a heart for the mission of Goodwill and the people that we serve. And to me, that heart is what empathy is, and that is, hiring somebody. So a lot of the questions that we ask when we hire, I know when we hired Ivan, we asked a lot of questions because, marketing is a craft, and people get experience, and but if they don't have the willingness or kind of the understanding that the population that we serve are special people, and we're going to do whatever we can to make sure they're successful. Sometimes they come to us and they need a little more, and we've got to have that understanding that we're going to work with these folks and provide them a little more till they find success. Our frontline supervisors are the same way. I've worked with a lot of retail leaders over the years, and it's all about the numbers. It's all about, how many items can I sell per hour or dollars per square foot, and how low can I control my wages so that I, make sure my operating income comes in. And, those are all important things from a retail perspective. But if that's all you're focused on and your results come on the backs of the people that you work with, and you have little concern for their success, then those folks just haven't been successful at Goodwill in any of our areas, and they kind of come to the surface fairly quickly because our employees know the culture and have that kind of expectation. And when there are outliers, which that happens, we try and take care of those really quickly, and through coaching and empowering and whatnot. But ultimately, that's there's a certain type of leader that we want to have and are proud of, and that's what we go for. So, Ivan, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I was going to say, and I think that plays out with your frontline workers because of the folks that, or many of the folks, not all, many of the folks that we do hire come to us with barriers, but as they find success, they actually move up through the organization. And you may start as a cashier, and I've met these folks, right? I'm the new guy on the block. I've been here a year and a half, but you go into our commercial services warehouses or factories, you go into our retail stores or our outlets, and you're talking to the person who is running an outlet. And that person started as a cashier, and they moved up through the organization. So I think that the empathy and the understanding is built in, and they end up, coaching others who are in the place where they started. And it's really an amazing thing to see play out. And the stories are absolutely incredible. I think when I first got here, we do this thing called our annual awards breakfast. And it's one of the first things that I got to work on. And the organization as a whole lifts up people through this process, that is as one of the folks who had to vote on who ends up becoming your education achievement person of the year. Like, as your first work responsibility, my job is to help pick who is the education achievement person. And all of these stories are amazing. But one that really stood out, a gentleman by the name of Jesse, who is leading one of our retail stores. This is a guy who literally overdoses and flatlines in his car while driving, crashes his car, ends up in prison, gets out of prison, and as part of his work release, has to get a job, gets a job with Goodwill. He has made the decision himself. This is not a Goodwill story. This is a Jesse story who happens to work at Goodwill. He has made the decision that he is not going down this road again. And he pours himself into his job as part of his work release. He's so good. He gets hired on, and starts working in the back, donation recipient, and then moves throughout the store, ends up a site leader, and is running a store. And his first store, talk about a challenge, is of the network of stores that we have, I think, and Kent, correct me if I'm wrong on this, he gets the only store that didn't make money. So it's like, hey, congratulations, here's a store that needs a turnaround. Within his first year, he turns the store around and ends up meeting a woman, falling in love, now has 2 beautiful children. And, he started as a donation recipient. And the folks now, as the leader of this store, the folks that he's drawn to are the ones who have the most challenges, but he can speak to them with a level of authenticity and empathy because he was there and he knows what they're going through. And he brings that to work every single day. And it's really an amazing story. And it's not an isolated story amongst the folks that we work with every single day. And it's fantastic and it's inspiring. And, I have a sports background, and people often ask me, hey, you were in sports for so long. What's it like moving from sports to Goodwill? And honestly, the enthusiasm and the cheers and, it moves over, but it feels deeper, if that is a thing. It feels so, it's not even rewarding because it's not my story, but it just, at the end of the day, I always get to cheer because I know that someone has changed their life based on what their goals were. And there's an infrastructure here to help them do that. And that happens every single day. And when you see it play out with folks who start as a cashier, who end up as a site leader, or who ends up as, I was a student and I ended up going to IU Law. And these are the graduates that we have coming out of our adult Excel centers or Indy Met. And it all starts at this place of empathy and understanding and challenging folks. I mean, whether you're in our nurse family partnership and you're a first-time mom, there's a lot of work that these folks are doing to ensure that their life and their child's life is going to be different than what they grew up with. And it starts really from a place of listening and empathy. And it's really rewarding on a day in, day out basis.
So something that you said, Ivan, makes me think about the fact that, in some respects, you all have kind of the best of both worlds because you're very mission driven, very purpose driven in terms of just the reason that the organization exists. You straddle that line between a business and a nonprofit, and having that really strong mission. And that's great. And that really helps you use empathy. It just feels very natural, I'm sure. But what about, what would be your guidance for those who maybe find themselves in more of a corporate position, or more of a, maybe they work in a manufacturing industry or something like that? It feels like, is empathy really a strategy that you can use regardless of what industry you're in, or what kind of insights would you have for folks who don't have the luxury, I guess you could say, of having a real purpose-driven mission for their organization?
Yeah, I would say, I think at the root, whatever industry you're in, you're working with people. And to go back to your earlier comment about Maslow, I think people have needs, and those needs don't stop because they walk in the door of their office or whatever job they may have. And I think an employer, if they want to get the best out of their workforce, should lean in to empathy and understanding and getting to know their workforce, to know their lives, to understand what's important to them. Because if you're able to address that, and there are for-profits that do this all the time. You could think of Starbucks or Google or Nike. Actually, when you look at what they do to try and remove barriers from their workforce to make them have the opportunity to be as productive as possible. They're addressing the needs, the lifestyle needs on a day-to-day basis, so that their folks can think about what they're doing at work and lessen the distractions. And I think it's a valuable tool that can be carried regardless of being a nonprofit, mission-driven organization or a for-profit organization. Ken, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would agree with everything you just said, Ivan, and also, Catherine, we, even though we're a nonprofit and that's a tax status, we have manufacturing, and we've got to deliver on customer expectations. We got to deliver on price. We've got to deliver on quality, and we've got to do that while providing an empathetic environment for our employees to work in, and not that we have to do that. We do that because we see success. And I've always believed that through empathy, you can have long-term results. I've worked with leaders before, and I've seen them where you can get some immediate results with a different style. But if you're looking for long-term, and one of our core values is lasting impact. If you really want lasting impact, you can do it best through an empathetic approach. And I've also seen this. I've worked for organizations that the culture does not, it would not be defined with empathy in it. But as an individual contributor, as an individual leader, you can bring that culture, to your part of the organization, or you could just be known as that person, right? That listens, that responds, and then, as you grow, or as your organization grows, it can grow with you. So you can have impact, yourself, or if you're in a position where you're leading an organization, you can definitely have impact that way with your expectations around empathy.
That's great. That's really great insight. With the time that we have remaining, I'd like to bring the conversation in a little bit more focused to communications with employees on a broader, more enterprise-wide level. And my question is, as you all think about, creating an empathetic environment and an empathetic tone to everything that you communicate, how does that translate into the communications that you do as an organization, not just as you as an individual leader, but Can you talk a little bit about, for example, feedback loops with employees and gathering feedback from people and the kinds of channels that you use for internal communications and things like that, and how you think about those things in terms of continuing that tone with employees?
Ivan, you've got communications in your title, so I'm going to toss that one to you to start.
Well, I think we use every tool in our toolbox to communicate with our folks. And it started before I got here, obviously, but we went out and surveyed the organization. How best do you want to consume information from leadership, from the organization? And it resulted in an employee-based newsletter that is literally mailed to people's homes. Also, there's an electronic version. We ended up with Workplace, which is basically, I call it our work Facebook. So every part of the organization, whether it's retail, nurse-family partnership, they can go on and communicate not only with each other, but with the organization as a whole. It's, hey, nurse-family partnership is down in Southern Indiana, and we are, hosting a symposium. And they put up a picture, and they're just letting people inside the organization know what they're doing. Or, hey, this is our employee of the month at commercial services down in Bloomington, and there's a picture of this person, so that the organization as a whole, not just that particular facility, knows who it is and can congratulate them and share in that moment. So it's everything from top level communication. Hey, here's our holiday schedule for 2021, or here's the strategic plan moving forward. It goes all the way down and is granular, and more importantly, it is employee generated communication amongst each other. And it's, I'll call it a two-way street. It's executives talking to the workforce, it's the workforce talking to executives and talking to each other, and utilizing every tool that we have in our arsenal to make sure that people are connected. And I think that it helped us tremendously going through last year. When you start to think about, we went through a time where over 2,000 of our workforce were furloughed or laid off last year. But we really took the time to be transparent with our workforce, and Kent not only communicated as the CEO, but the VPs communicated with their individual groups almost daily, letting them know what was going on. Talk about stress and anxiety, not knowing if you're going to have a job, not knowing if your job is going to come back. The ability to keep people up to date really lessened the stress of a very stressful time. And that was everything from phone calls, and I've talked about electronic communications. Picking up the phone in times of high stress is the best thing that you can do, and talk to people one-on-one, because you can hear the nuance in a conversation. You can hear a stress point, you can hear relief, you can express gratitude, you can do all the things by talking to someone. And I would not X out talking to people, talking one-on-one. And when we get back to face-to-face, clearly that's going to be great. But Zoom was a tremendous help as well through all of this time, and literally use every single tool that you possibly can to communicate and be clear and deliberate in those communications.
Evan, did you all discover during the last 16, 18 months that there were some things that maybe you had never done before, but you started because of the pandemic, that you think even when things get back to normal, whatever normal is going forward, that really worked well and we're going to keep doing that? Or were there also things that maybe you tried and they didn't work well, and you learned some lessons that you are causing you to change the way you think about your employee communications and employee engagement?
I think that through the pandemic, we learned that we could increase our reach utilizing things like this, like Zoom or whatever online meeting tool you may have used. We're able to invite more folks. People were able to make the meeting and be more timely. And I think that that was really a nice eye opener because it helped us to be as productive, if not more productive at times. And I think to a degree, some of that will continue. And one example from workforce perspective, we've got folks who live all over central and southern Indiana, some of whom work here in our corporate offices, and they would spend anywhere from 1.5 to 2 hours a day commuting. Instead, they're working from their home and they're actually using that commute time as work time, which allowed them to get even more done because we were in a fully electronic environment. Talk about empathy moving forward. We've got folks who have literally been working from home for the last 16 months. Now we're all starting to get to the point where hey, the office is still here. We still own this building. We want to have you come back to the office. How do you thread that needle of unwinding work from home while allowing for just the comfort that has provided for families over the last year and a half, or just for people over the last year and a half. And that's something that we are talking about more and more as more people get vaccinated and things start to open back up. In terms of what didn't work, I'll leave that one for Kent. But I really felt like our ability to communicate probably got better over the course of the pandemic. As an executive team, our ability to work together to make decisions at critical times got faster because of that communication. And probably, our early meetings, and we had a lot of early meetings every single morning for a good period of time there, just trying to stay on top of what was happening. And as you guys know, it was changing every single day. So our ability to communicate was greatly enhanced. And I think we'll want to hang on to that as we move forward.
That's great. Yeah, Kent, if you have any closing thoughts, we'd love to have you kind of wrap us up here with the last minute or two that we have remaining.
Yeah, and I'll just add, we've engaged the last couple of years in a performance climate survey, which we do with a local organization, First Person, and that's been really helpful from a listening and responding standpoint to understand where our folks are. So that's another way that we engage. And as far as what doesn't work, what I miss with the environment we're in now is the interactions. You can try hard to be empathetic and have that type of environment via Zoom and via phone calls. It's not, to me, it's not as fulfilling, and it's not as easy to be that type of leader when you don't have that hallway time, that water cooler time. So like Ivan said, we're in discussions now trying to figure out what next looks like. It'll be a hybrid. I think a lot of organizations are doing that. They see the value in both. So we're just going to be working hard to try and figure out how to do that. But, from my perspective, it's been great to be with all of you today. And empathy is a topic that we talk about and we embrace. So we were really excited. We agreed to do this before we knew the topic. So that's how much we care about you guys. But then we were even more excited when this was the topic that was going to be. So it's been great to be with all of you. And if anybody has any questions afterwards, Ivan and I can be reached, and happy to speak about any of what we've talked about with any of you.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Kent and Ivan, both for your time and for your insights. I think it's always good for us just to remind ourselves as leaders that we can always get better, and we can always start doing things that maybe we stopped doing or we never did before. and that can make a real difference for our employees. So we appreciate your insights on that. Just for everyone else, as a reminder, Shoff Chats is a concept that we are going to keep going with all kinds of interesting topics and guests over the future months. And so we're working right now on finalizing our next one that will be in July. So more detail will come very, very soon on that. Thank you all for joining us. And as a reminder, we will have a summary blog and a recording of today's session that will go out to everyone who registered today, and it'll be on the Shoff social channels. And if you have an idea for a future Shoff Chat or a guest that you think would be an interesting addition to our lineup, we would love to hear those ideas from you. Please feel free to reach out to me, send me an email or message us on our social channels. We'd love to hear your ideas and explore those types of topics with you. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us. Have a great day, and go out and show some empathy to someone today, because it might be the best thing that happens to them. Thanks.